So you've ever had one of these days where you're minding your own business, trying to put together something like a small engine, and your righty-tighty all of a sudden goes righty-loosey? What's going on? Oh, no biggie. I guess I must need a thread insert. But you take the cover off, only to find that the casting has broken. There's literally no material to put a thread insert into. So I guess my only option is to go buy a $100 and $200 aluminum casting part for this. Or I got a better idea. Why don't I make a video showing everything you need to know to be able to do aluminum casting TIG repairs so that we can get this thing back in business for the cost of gas and filler rod. Let's go. Now before we start here, if you need any information on how to weld safely with electric welders, or how to set up your TIG welder, or to be able to weld the fickle beast that is aluminum, I will put a link up to my welding playlist videos up here. I highly recommend you go watch those ones, and especially the welding aluminum ones, because it pertains to the aluminum part that we're going to be doing in this video. Now in most cases, you're going to really have to remove the part from the whole assembly for multiple reasons, because you're putting a ton of heat in there that you don't really want to melt gaskets and wires and things like that. And in this case, there's actual fuel system component stuff. So the safer and better alternative is just to remove the parts and then weld it separately. Now before we start prepping this piece for welding, it's a 10-year-old engine piece, and it's got oil and grease and grit and dirt in here. So probably the first logical step would be getting some heavy-duty degreaser, get a good brush, and give this a good scrub to make sure it's nice and clean. There we go, that's a lot better all cleaned up, but man, now I can see all the damage on the cooling fins, and there's a boss broken off or something else over there too. And it's amazing how much damage these things will take and just keep ticking. But it's really sad. It'd be nice to see people have a little bit more love for small engines.
Hi, I'm Scott McLaughlin. Will you be a hero to a helpless engine? Every day, innocent, small engines are abused, neglected, and beaten on, and are crying out for help. For only 50 cents a day, these engines can have the proper attention and care so they can live long, healthy lives. Right now, there's an engine out there that needs your help. Without your love and attention, it's not going to make it. So please, call now. Thank you.
Now with any kind of aluminum welding repair, you're going to want to get rid of all of the aluminum oxide off the surface. So whether you're going to use a dedicated stainless steel wire brush, which we're going to get most of that with, or because this thing has some threads where you're not really going to be able to get the wire brush in there, you could either drill it out or use a carbide burr on an air grinder or a Dremel tool so we can get rid of all that aluminum oxide. Now up to this point, all of my videos have been talking about putting two things together with welding. But today's project is the process of just putting material back on. Now in this case, we're trying to add material that is literally busted and broken off, but this is also used on parts when they need to build up the surface so that it can be remachined and maybe resharpened and put back in use. So because we're adding material that we want to have back, there's some other things we could talk about. So the first thing is we got to look at this part and figure out what is the best way way to tackle this repair. Now, because we need to basically eventually have a threaded hole put in here, we're not going to just weld around here and leave the center. We're going to weld this completely solid up. That way we can have a center punch and drill exactly where it needs to be and then tap it and not have any voids. Now, the other thing we need to look at is where the weld needs to go to and maybe even go past so that we could build the surfaces back to where they were. So for example, we want weld all the way up to this height here because that's the original height. However, we don't really want to weld right over top of this either because then we're going to lose our frame of reference for where this has to stop so that the cover can go over top and get machined down to that. Now, we could opt to measure from here to here and record that so that we would have that measurement, and then we could weld, or you just leave a little bit of witness there so that you can machine it down to that height. Now, on the bottom here, you can see that the threads don't really go all the way to the bottom here. That's quite a long boss. So we don't really need to weld all the way down here, and that has another advantage. If we don't weld all the way to the end, we have a hole here that we can use as a guide or a reference to where that hole needs to be to get that to go exactly where we want it. The other way of doing that would be basically do the weld repair, machine it down flat, and we could put the cover on and attempt to put the other bolts in so it's in the right location, and then where the hole is for this third bolt to go in, we could use that to locate it as well. So basically the next thing is just get this cleaned up with some acetone, so chemically make sure it's clean, and then we're off to start welding this up. Now, for your individual aluminum casting project and what welder and equipment you have, you're gonna have your settings a little different from mine, but I will walk you through my setup here. So I've got my TIG welder on AC for aluminum welding. I've got my amperage set at 110, which is a little high, but I'll be able to back off the heat with the pedal. I've got my pulse frequency this time turned right off, so I'm gonna have to control the heat with that. If you find you're getting too hot and melting through, you can play with your pulse frequency on your machine. Now my AC balance, I'm going to have this cranked on the cleaning section. Reason why is I find that these aluminum castings are quite dirty. In fact, some of them are so bad you literally have to pause with the torch and have the aluminum boil a little bit of that porosity away and let that cleaning action do its thing. As for gas, I've got 100% argon in the bottle here, running about 15 liters per minute. And for a tungsten electrode, I've got a 2% lanthanated in there. It's been sharpened and blunted with about a 1 mil flat. Mind you, with the cleaning action set where it's at, it's going to ball up pretty quick. So let's give this a crack. Oh yeah, there's tons of junk in here. Now this part that's broken up here, I'm going to have to kind of just try to weld through it, and then that way I can get past it to fill on the other side. Yeah, even with this cleaning action the way it is, this thing is absolutely horrendously dirty. Now it's so dirty, I'm actually going to pause this and clean it up with the stainless steel brush. Now when you're near the edges, you have to regulate your heat quite a bit, otherwise you'll just melt through. Rather than just ripping right through to the end and showing you the final product, I thought I would stop and kind of at a halfway point and talk about it. So when you're doing this, remember that we're trying to add material that was physically not there anymore. And we don't want just the bare minimum. We want enough that this is back to original size and maybe even a little bigger so that we can have enough meat to machine it down and have it nice and strong. Now, the key thing that you're kind of practicing here is something called padding, where you're laying strips of beads down over top of each other. And because of the different areas of where those beads are, you have to regulate your heat different. So near the edges, you're going to have to be making it a bit colder, being a little bit more regulated with your heat. And then when you get to the middle, you can crank it up a bit to deposit material. So it's a really good exercise on being able to manage your heat while you're welding and on the fly, which is what a great thing TIG welding's for. So let's continue on here, and we're going to go a little bit bigger and a little bit wider so that we for sure have the meat on here to drill that hole back in. Okay, once again, there's another shot just so that you don't have it all the way to the end. So you're just laying beads one after another. Keep that edge going up nice and strong so it doesn't melt away on you, and you just keep going till you get thick enough to be where that hole and boss needs to be. Now that you've got this all welded up, I would take a quick minute and just take a look and see and confirm that you've got everything you need in here, enough meat to be able to get back to where this was and maybe even a little stronger. If not, just real quickly go back, do another couple of beads and beef up that area so that you're going to have this work for you. Now every casting is a little different, but for me in this case, I can see just the tail kind of witness on the top of the old boss here. So we're going to bring that level or surface down to where it was originally. And then on the back side here, we've got this kind of flat lip here. That's where that's got to go down to. And then I think at that point, it would be pretty smart to actually get the cover on and figure out where the hole goes, drill and tap it. Then we can focus on getting this boss area cleaned up so that we have enough material there and maybe even leave it stronger if we can. Now, to get this to go down, depends what machine and equipment you have. You could do a lot of this with just a file and a file card. I've got some air tools in here, so I'm going to use one of these sanding discs with about like 80-60 grit on here. That'll make quick work of that. But if you've got some fancy equipment like a milling machine, being able to strap this to the top of the milling machine and take those cuts off would be awesome. But totally doable in a home garage with just hand tools. Okay, we're gonna put this cylinder head back in with a couple bolts so it's located in the right spot. Okay, and then this cover goes on with 3 bolts. So we're gonna put the 2 bottom ones in and snug them up. And then the third one is where we have to put the hole in. Now I'm also going to add this little deflector piece that goes in here because there's a nice little ridge here that this cover is supposed to sit right up against, and it's going to locate it from the bolts that go in here for the cylinder head. So that'll be a good way of positioning exactly where that hole needs to be. Okay, and then it's just a matter of positioning this cover in relation to that line and where it's got to be, taking a center punch and a hammer and locating it right in the center of this hole on the end of this slot, and that's where you're going to drill and tap that hole. All right, so the bolt that goes in here is a 1/4 inch by 20 NC. Now we have to know what size drill that's going to need. So if you Google a tap drill size chart, you'll look up 1/4 by 20 and you're going to find that it is a number 7 drill bit. Now, if you don't have number drill bits, you can look on another chart and see what the next closest one is. And for me, the very next size up is a 13/64. So that's what I'm going to drill the hole with. And then I've got a 1/4 by 20 NC tap that I'm going to put in, and I'll show you how I drill that on my drill press. Now, if you don't have a drill press, you just have to make sure you're really nice and square and perpendicular both directions with your drill when you do that. But if we use a drill press, it should be nice and straight. To make sure that you tap this hole nice and straight, perpendicular in both directions, here's a little trick. Get yourself one of these short, stubby T-handle tap handles. Put your 1/4 inch by 20 in there. And then on the top of the T-handle is a little kind of hole that's right in the center. So then what you do is you get yourself a small tap that has a little point end on it. Go ahead and put this up in the chuck. And you can put a little bit of WD-40 on the end of this. WD-40 for aluminum is a really good cutting fluid. And then you just put a little bit of pressure on the quill of the drill stock as you kind of turn this clockwise, and it will keep it nice and perpendicular as you cut your threads. Now, once you get about 3-4 turns in here, you don't have to use this anymore. It's more just the initial starting of it, so it starts nice and straight. Just keep light pressure on the quill. Should drop a little bit every time you go around. And like I said, once you get a couple turns, you can let go of this and you can just finish it by hand. Now, roughly every 2 full turns, you can go back about 1/2 turn to clear the chips. And it's aluminum, so it's pretty soft. We don't have to worry about having any chips break the tap. So every 2 turns or so, just go back halfwards, 1/2 turn. And just keep going until you go all the way through. When it starts to feel really easy, the tap's gone all the way through to the other side, you can just take it out. Or you might actually have it bottom out, which is what mine's going to do, but that should be enough threads for this bolt in here anyway. So let's take this out. There you go, tap hold fixed. Now we probably should have put a slight chamfer with a slightly bigger drill in here before we did the taps. So I'll do that and I'll probably run the tap through just to clear it up. There we go, tap hole repair complete. Now let's go take a look and see if we need to take anything off this boss here. With this cover back on where it would be, you can see that this boss actually interferes with nothing here. And even the cover that goes on here from the backside, there's nothing in here that's going to interfere if we leave it as big as it is. However, it does look a little bit kind of silly, so I think I'll just spend a couple minutes and take a file and clean the boss up, but I'm definitely not going to skinny it down to the 3-4 millimeters around the hole that it was stock. So I'm just going to clean it up a little bit, deburr it, and then put it back in business. And then remember, probably the whole reason that this boss broke off in the first place is somebody didn't torque this up. So this one's going to get torqued up to 85 inch-pounds. That way it's not too loose and the cover falls off, and yet not too tight to strip the hole or break the boss off. There we go. One happy small engine ready to go. All right, that's a wrap in another video from Weigh the Wrench, this time on how to TIG repair any of your aluminum casting parts so you can get things back in service like this little small engine. This thing's gonna happily be purring in someone's go-kart very soon. If you have any questions about what we did in the video, feel free to put them down in the comment section below and I'll help you out as much as possible. And if you haven't already, why don't you join us on Instagram? That way you can see all the stuff going in the shop behind the scenes in between videos. Till next time, take it easy.